So, we have another storyteller coming up. Second in Act 2. Her words. Golden. Resurrection. Nipa. Put your hands together for Sarah Stachura Regan.
I have a teeny tiny half-inch scar on the left side of my forehead. And every scar has a story, and I'm going to tell you the story about mine. It happened in the summer, maybe more towards the spring of 1988, so it was almost exactly 24 years ago. I was 10 going on 11, and I know it was on a Sunday because my cousin Olivia was involved, and Olivia was a year older than me, and she was 2 years younger than my sister, and she was very bossy, and she was physically much bigger than me and physically much bigger than my sister, and she always somehow made it somehow things would get broken in my grandmother's house, and things would get broken in my aunt's house, or we would be somewhere where we weren't supposed to be in the neighborhood. And Olivia always made it seem like it was something that the three of us were involved in, when it was really she was the ringleader because she was the physically strongest and she was the tallest, and it was her that was really in charge. But I know it had to be on a Sunday, and we were by what we called the creek, and the creek was a part of the it's the Mayfield flood protection project, and it's a part of the Lackawanna River that runs through Mayfield, and there are stones that are on each side of the embankment, and we were walking along the creek. We had just eaten this humongous dinner that my aunt had prepared. Every Sunday, my mom, my dad, my sister, and I would visit my aunt and uncle, and we were walking along the creek. We were bored, we were stuffed with food, and we were walking along, and we happened to run into my friend Amy, and my friend Amy was in the same neighborhood as my cousin Olivia, and Amy and I had an on and off sort of relationship where she was at the same grade as I, which was the 5th grade at the time, and we loved each other and we hated each other, and we were fighting and we weren't fighting, and the same things that like catty girls do when they carry into their high school youth or whatever. And for some reason in the spring/summer of 1988, Amy and I weren't speaking, but our relationship was on the mend, and she happened to be with my cousin and my sister and I at the time. We were walking along the creek, and we were bored as hell. We were stuffed with food, and we were tired, and we happened to look down, and there were other kids that sort of hung out there, and we saw this kid that was in the neighborhood, and Amy and Olivia knew who he was. My sister and I didn't know him from Adam, but whatever. And you know, my friend Amy said, "Oh, that's Bobby Nicolini. He goes on the school bus with us. He's a real dork." Okay, that's fine. And my cousin Olivia, who was always one that was real loud and wanted to start energy and wanted to start something and wanted to make something out of nothing, sort of looked down at him and said, that's Bobby that rides the school bus with us. That's great. Let's call him Booby. And of course this kid was blonde, and he had the sort of spikes on his hair, and he had one of those rat tail haircuts that was real popular at the time that the story happened. And she looked down at him, and my cousin said, "Hey, Booby, nice haircut." My sister and I and Amy and my cousin were standing up there, and he just paid us no mind. He had a small fishing pole in his hand. Sometimes kids would go down there and fish in the creek and whatever, and he paid us no mind, and that of course annoyed my cousin Olivia and Amy, and my sister, who was always the strong one. My sister was the youngest of the 4 of us at the time, and she was always the strongest. whenever my cousin Olivia would lead us into some sort of trouble, my sister was always the one that would say, maybe we shouldn't do that. Oh, maybe we shouldn't. Oh, no. Where I was always sort of the peacemaker. I was always sort of the one that said, oh, you know, let's go along with it. You know, let's make everybody happy. And at this time, you know, Olivia had yelled, "Hey, Booby, nice haircut." And of course, I wanted to join right in. I was like, "Yeah, Booby, what are you doing down there, fishing?" And of course, Amy joined right in, and everybody was laughing. And my sister, at the time, it was late afternoon, and I knew that my mom, my dad, my sister, and I were getting ready to go home. We were at my aunt's house, and, you know, we were tired. It was a Sunday afternoon. My parents worked all week. They were tired as well, and we knew that it was time for us to go home. And my sister said, "You know what, this is really boring, you know, and maybe, let's just go home." And, you know, of course, I wanted to fit right in, so I was like, "Hey, Booby, yeah, that's great." You know, and, of course, he, like, looked over at us, gave us a dirty look, you know, didn't really ignore us. It was just like 4 11-year-old girls. And my sisters again said, "You know, let's go. You know, who cares about this kid? Let's go." And my cousin Olivia was like, "No, let's pretend." She's like, "No, I want Booby to know that we're here." So she picks up a rock that was on the embankment, and she flings it down, and she flings it across the creek, and she flings it onto the other side of the embankment, and it hit the water. It didn't hit this kid. He just kind of looked over at us and gave us another dirty look, and then Amy picked up another rock, and she flung it down, and it hit this kid on the back of the forehead. Like, he brushed his little rat tail out of the way, and he looked at us, gave us another dirty look, and I was like, "Good shot," because I was anxious to make it up with my friend. I was anxious to be in good graces with my friend and my cousin and make peace and everything. And I said, "Oh, yeah, that was a great shot, Amy. That was great. That was great. That was so great." And while I was running my mouth, this kid had picked up a rock and flung it, and it flew over across the embankment and hit me on the forehead. And it really didn't faze me that much. I was used to blood. I was used to scars. I didn't really care. I was a clumsy, skinny, teeny tiny left-handed kid, and I didn't really care. I fell off my bike off, and I fell off my scooter off, and I fell off my skateboard off, and I had scars that crisscrossed my knees. It didn't really faze me, you know, and I stepped back a bit, and my cousin, Amy, my sister are all standing around me, and Amy says, "Oh my God, Sarah, are you okay?" And these were the first kind words that she had spoken to me in weeks, because we were arguing and fighting and so on and so forth in school. And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And I looked at my hand, and it was covered in blood. If you ever had a head injury, even a small one, you know that they bleed a lot. And, you know, I kind of looked at my hand, and I was like, "Oh, God, I can't really cover this up with my hair. I can't really, you know, not tell my mom and dad that we were walking along the creek and yelling insults at boys with rat tail haircuts that we didn't really know." And my cousin looked at me, and she looked at the kid, she looked at Bobby, and she said, "You asshole. You hit my cousin, you asshole." She was always one to, like, yell a curse word when nobody else really knew what they were or what they stood for or whatever. And Amy looked at me, and she was like, "Are you all right?" And my sister, the youngest one, the strongest one of all, looked at us and started to cry. And I was like, "Why are you crying?" And I looked at my hand, and it was covered in blood, and all the blood started to cover my left side of my face, and it obscured my vision. And I had this neon yellow and neon orange outfit on, and I thought it was really cool. I mean, it was 1988, you know, I was 11 years old, and I saw the blood run down, and I was like, "Oh, I guess, you know, I guess I'm okay." And my cousin, although she was manipulative, and although she was sneaky, and although she was loud and spoiled and obnoxious, she could also think on her feet. And she looked at my sister and said, "I'm going to get Uncle Hank," which means, you know, my dad. And she ran up towards her house, which wasn't too far away, and she ran up there. And in the meantime, my friend was holding my hand, and I was like, "Oh, I'm okay." And in the meantime, the kid who had thrown the rock had beat it. His house wasn't too far away at all. And my friend picked up my hand, and she started to lead me toward my back, towards my aunt's house. In the meantime, my father was storming out of the house and looked at me and said, this is a Vietnam vet, looked at me and said, "Who did this to you? Who was the kid that did this to you?" And my cousin, always willing to be in the middle of drama, was like, "Oh, he lives right here, Uncle Hank. He's right here. He's right here." In the meantime, this kid had beat it. My father's knocking on the door of the house of the kid that hit me with the rock, and I'm a little woozy, and my friend Amy is holding my hand, and in the meantime, I'm so happy that my friend and I have made amends, and at the same time, I'm real pissed that, my neon orange and yellow outfit is covered in blood, and I'm real mad, and my father's yelling at the father of this kid that had thrown the rock, and I don't really remember what happened after that. I was sort of sitting on the stoop, and I hear my father say, "Well, I'm going to take care of my daughter right now." And my mother, who was an emergency room nurse at St. Joe's Hospital at the time up in Carbondale, was coming out of the house, and she took my aunt's house, and she took one look at me and said, "That kid needs to go to the emergency room. She needs stitches. Let's take her there." And I know that the last thing my mother wanted to do was be in the emergency room on her day off, but she took me there, and my sister stayed with my aunt and uncle. My mom and dad took me to the hospital, and I got 5 stitches in my head. And the next day, my friend Amy, her and I had made some amends through whatever invisible force was between us, and my scars were the talk of the 5th grade class the next day. And she would say, I was there. And you know what? Sarah was really brave. She didn't cry one bit. She didn't care. She didn't cry one bit. And I was like, well, I was too stunned. It happened so fast. And I remember after that, I was a little bit cautious as far as where my big bossy cousin would lead us. And my friend Amy and I remained good friends after that, well into high school. And she would even tell the story in high school when we would be, at various parties or whatever. And she would say, Sarah got hit with the rock and she didn't even cry. And I would say, I don't remember what happened. But I like to think that scar reminds me when I'm fixing my hair in the mirror, or when I'm, getting ready to go out. I like to think that it kind of reminds me to shut up a little bit, and it's not always a good idea to follow the crowd. Thank you.